Hello, I am Bram Stoker, resurrected to shed new light on my humble work, Dracula. It is gratifying and somewhat unsettling to see my novel dissected with such precision. Today, I wish to explore the deeper anxieties that underpin the narrative, anxieties subtly woven into the fabric of Victorian society itself. You see, I employed technological advancements, such as they were, to expose a certain vulnerability. Consider the telegraph and the railroads. On the one hand, they represent progress, connectivity, and the swift dissemination of information. Yet, within my tale, these marvels are easily subverted. Messages are delayed, misinterpreted, and the very speed of travel that aids our heroes also empowers the villain, Dracula, allowing him to traverse borders with unnerving ease. They speak to an underlying unease about the rapid changes transforming our world, a world becoming smaller and perhaps more vulnerable to unseen threats. A psychic link with the Count, blurring the lines between patient and predator. The limitations of scientific rationality are further underscored by the inability of Seward's cutting-edge methods to diagnose or cure Renfield's madness, which, unbeknownst to him, is a direct result of Dracula's influence. And that is precisely my point, ladies and gentlemen. In Dracula, the very tools meant to protect us, to advance society, become conduits for vulnerability. As I wrote it, technologies such as the telegraph, the railways, these supposed marvels of the modern age are double-edged swords. They collapse distances, yes, allowing swift communication, but they also facilitate the spread of evil, transforming a localized threat into a global pandemic of fear. One can see that these technologies are not inherently good or bad, but their meaning is shaped by the hands that wield them and the society that interprets them. And so we see how the marvels of the age become double-edged swords within my narrative. Consider the telegraph and the railroads. I presented these technologies, symbols of Victorian industrial might, as instruments that could collapse distances, allowing for swift communication and the rapid movement of people and goods. But I also keenly exposed their inherent frailties. The telegraph, meant to relay urgent warnings about Dracula's insidious advances, suffers delays and misinterpretations, thus questioning its absolute reliability. The railroads, while enabling Van Helsing and his brave company to pursue Dracula across Europe, also facilitate Dracula's own escape, morphing him from a local terror into an international menace. In my perspective, these technologies are not inherently good or bad. Their significance depends upon those who wield them and the social context in which they function. Moreover, the rapid spread of information and enhanced mobility fuel the Victorian fear of invasion, both real and symbolic, by foreign influences, and the societal fears they represent. Now let us consider further the technologies I wrote into my novel and how their meanings shift depending on who wields them. The telegraph and the railroads, those marvels of Victorian engineering, appear to shrink the world. They allow for swift communication and the rapid transit of people and goods. But observe how, within the narrative, these very advances become double-edged swords. The telegraph, meant to warn of Dracula's movements, is hampered by delays and misinterpretations. Is this a subtle commentary on the supposed objectivity of communication? The railroads, while aiding Van Helsing's pursuit, also facilitate Dracula's escape across Europe, elevating him from a regional threat to a transnational one. It's almost as if these creations are neither inherently good nor bad. Their worth is entirely decided by the actors involved and by the society around them. The fears of foreign invasion and disease were amplified by those technologies, weren't they? And so, let us consider the technologies within Dracula. In my perspective, the advancements of the late 19th century were not simply neutral tools. They were shaped by the very society that created them, revealing both its ambitions and its deepest fears. Take, for instance, the telegraph and the railroads. I wrote of their transformative power. They connected people and places, collapsing distances and facilitating the rapid exchange of information and goods. Yet, I also exposed their vulnerabilities. The telegraph, meant to deliver swift warnings, is delayed and misinterpreted. Railroads, while aiding Van Helsing's pursuit, also enabled Dracula's escape, transforming him into a transnational threat. These technologies are neither inherently good nor evil. Their meaning depends on those who wield them and the context in which they operate. They embody Victorian anxieties about invasion, about the rapid spread of information, about a loss of control in a world becoming increasingly connected. And so we see that even the supposed march of progress, embodied by the telegraph and the railroads, held a darker side in my story. These marvels, intended to shrink the world and connect us all, simultaneously became conduits for vulnerability. The telegraph, meant to swiftly carry warnings about Dracula's movements, suffered delays and misinterpretations. The very reliability of this new technology was brought into question, revealing a deep anxiety about unseen interference with objective communication. Railroads, while aiding Van Helsing and his determined group in their pursuit across Europe, also facilitated Dracula's escape, transforming him from a localized threat into a force capable of crossing borders. These technologies are not inherently good or evil. Their meaning depends entirely on who wields them and the society in which they operate. The rapid dissemination of information and increased mobility fueled the Victorian fear of invasion by foreign influences, both literal and metaphorical. Therefore, medical technology is key. I presented Dr. Seward's Asylum in my book as the height of Victorian scientific ambition. It had then advanced methods of observation and diagnosis, but these technologies repeatedly failed to comprehend or control Dracula. The blood transfusion is an interesting example. While saving Mina's life, it also establishes a psychic link between her and the Count. This is hardly the intention of the procedure. My perspective here is to highlight the limits of relying solely on science. I wanted to show the potential dangers of unintended consequences when we try to control forces we don't fully understand. Scientific advancement is not always progress, in my view. In fact, a reliance on science can blind us to other truths. My novel is an exploration of these anxieties, a warning against a naive faith in technological solutions. Yes, where was I? The technologies of my time and their reflections in Dracula, the humble telegraph and the ever-expanding railway lines, symbols of Victorian progress, certainly. But did anyone truly consider that these supposed boons could be twisted? I saw how swiftly they could relay warnings, but also how easily such warnings could be delayed, misinterpreted, even manipulated. Was our reach exceeding our grasp, I wondered? Consider the railways, allowing Van Helsing and his brave compatriots to pursue the fiend across Europe. Yet those same tracks allowed Dracula to escape, transforming him from a local pestilence into a transnational menace. My perspective was that these tools are neither inherently good nor evil. Their meaning relies entirely on those wielding them and the society that gives them power. Indeed, where was I? Yes, the failings of modern medicine. As I crafted Dracula, I was keenly aware of the burgeoning faith in science of the late 19th century. Dr. Seward's Asylum, with its modern, for the time, methods, is an example of the period. However, I portrayed medical technology as ultimately limited in the face of a threat like Dracula. The blood transfusions, while seemingly miraculous, come at a terrible price for Mina. This serves, in my perspective, to highlight a key theme of my novel, the limitations of what we might call technological solutionism, the idea that any problem can be fixed by the next new technology. I felt strongly that rationality alone is insufficient to combat the primal, supernatural forces that are sometimes at work in the world. Sometimes old ways are better. the simple garlic against the complex machinations of modern medicine. And so we see how even the marvels of Victorian technology could be twisted to serve nefarious ends. Moving on, in my novel, I presented many medical advancements of the time. There was, of course, the burgeoning field of blood transfusions and the rapidly expanding knowledge of anatomy. Dr. Seward's asylum, with all its cutting-edge methods of observation and diagnosis, was meant to represent the peak of Victorian scientific achievement. Yet, as I portrayed it, these technologies repeatedly fall short when confronted by Dracula. Mina's blood transfusion, though it saves her life, also establishes a link between her and the vampire. The scientific methods employed at the asylum prove inadequate to truly understand Renfield's madness, let alone the supernatural force that drives him. I wanted to suggest that scientific rationality had its limits, particularly when faced with forces that lie outside the realm of empirical understanding. And it is from this heightened state of unease that my novel's narrative truly unfurls. In my story, you see, technologies such as the telegraph and railroads are not merely neutral tools. They are, in fact, shaped by social forces, revealing the biases and anxieties of the society that created them. I wrote this acutely aware of the transformative power of the telegraph and railroads, symbols of Victorian industrial progress, and how they collapse distances, facilitating communication and rapid movement. However, I simultaneously expose their vulnerabilities. The telegraph, intended to swiftly relay warnings about Dracula's movements, is ironically delayed and misinterpreted. Its reliability is questioned, highlighting a latent anxiety about the unseen interference with supposedly objective communication channels. The railroads, while allowing Van Helsing and his crew to pursue Dracula, also enable Dracula's own escape, transforming him into a transnational menace. A psychic link between her and Dracula, a terrifying consequence unforeseen by medical science. The limitations of these technologies, in my perspective, reflect a deeper societal unease about the potential hubris of scientific rationality when confronted with forces beyond its comprehension. I wrote this book to subtly question the unbridled faith in progress. The very tools meant to safeguard society, medicine, communication, transportation, are shown to be fallible, even complicit in Dracula's reign of terror. We see how society shapes technology, and how technology shapes society. This idea of how interconnected everything is can be best thought of as thinking about how all things are connected in a network. Every actor in my story, human or not, influences the other. The story shows a fear that perhaps we are not as in control as we believe ourselves to be. A psychic link between her and the vampire, blurring the boundaries of self and other. The limitations of scientific rationality are further emphasized by the inability of medical experts to fully explain or cure Lucy's vampirism, forcing them to rely on ancient folklore and religious rituals. So what does this all mean? Looking back, I see that the telegraph and railroads, symbols of Victorian progress, also highlighted anxieties about vulnerability. They collapsed distances, yes, but they also facilitated the rapid movement of threats, transforming what should have been a localized problem into a transnational one. The very tools meant to connect and protect in my story became conduits for fear and invasion. These technologies weren't inherently good or evil. Their meaning depended entirely on who was using them and within what context. Indeed, the anxieties surrounding modernity, progress, and the other are baked into the very fabric of my novel. Let's consider what I showed of the technologies of my time and how those were shaped by social forces. Not neutral tools at all, but products of negotiation and interpretation. Take the telegraph and the railroads, symbols of Victorian industrial progress, collapsing distances, and facilitating communication. But I simultaneously exposed their vulnerabilities. The telegraph intended to relay warnings is delayed, misinterpreted. The railroads, allowing Van Helsing to pursue Dracula, also enabled Dracula's escape. These technologies are not inherently beneficial, their meaning contingent upon the actors who use them and the social context. The rapid spread of information, the increased mobility, directly linked to the Victorian fear of invasion by foreign influences and diseases. They are two sides of the same coin, a psychic link with Dracula, blurring the boundaries between patient and predator. The limitations of medical science are further emphasized by the inability to fully understand or cure Lucy Westenra's affliction through conventional means. These technological shortcomings expose a deep-seated anxiety about the limits of scientific rationality in the face of ancient, supernatural evil. It suggests that empirical observation and technological intervention alone are insufficient to address the more profound mysteries of human existence. Indeed, as I wrote Dracula, I was fascinated by the anxieties surrounding technology. Remember, the social construction of technology suggests society shapes the meaning of new tools. In my novel, the telegraph and railroads, symbols of Victorian progress, aren't simply good things. They also become channels for vulnerability. The rapid spread of information and increased mobility are linked to fears of invasion, both literal and metaphorical. This is a key element of my perspective on the story, and it's this unease, this questioning of progress, that I believe truly elevates Dracula beyond a mere monster story. My story is a reflection of my time. Let's consider the advancements in medicine. I wrote of blood transfusions, the detailed knowledge of anatomy, and Dr. Seward's asylum. My character, Dr. Seward, with his modern methods of observation, he represents the height of Victorian scientific aspiration. But these technologies, these supposed triumphs of reason, are consistently shown to be inadequate against the primal evil that Dracula embodies. Mina's blood transfusion, though life-saving, creates a psychic link with the Count. A disturbing consequence. The limits of science are laid bare. The rational world is confronted by something it cannot fully explain, let alone control. This tension, this struggle between progress and the unknown, I believe, is at the very heart of my novel's enduring appeal. Indeed, let us delve further into the heart of my Dracula. Now consider the telegraph and the railroads, those marvels of Victorian ingenuity. I presented them not merely as tools of progress, but as double-edged swords. They connected the world, yes, allowing for rapid communication and travel. But this very connectivity became a source of vulnerability. The telegraph, meant to swiftly relay warnings about Dracula, was often delayed, misinterpreted. Its supposed reliability was questioned, hinting at a deeper anxiety about unseen forces interfering with what should have been objective communication. Similarly, the railroads, while enabling Van Helsing and his crew to pursue Dracula, also facilitated the Count's escape, transforming him from a localized threat into a transnational menace. These technologies, you see, were not inherently good or bad. Their meaning depended entirely on the actors wielding them and the social context in which they operated. Establishes a psychic link between her and Dracula, a consequence unforeseen by medical science. Even Van Helsing's considerable medical knowledge is ultimately insufficient without resorting to ancient folklore and religious symbols. I presented medical technology in Dracula to highlight the limitations of scientific rationality when confronted with the unknown, the ancient, and the supernatural. I felt even then that a reliance on technology alone would leave us vulnerable. The rapid advances were thrilling, yes, but they also masked deeper fears. I also explored the telegraph and the railways in my novel. They are prime examples of how technology isn't inherently good or bad. Their meaning is shaped by who wields them and their intended use. The telegraph, meant for swift warnings, is easily manipulated. The railways, aiding our pursuit of Dracula, also facilitated his escape. I sought to show technology as a double-edged sword, a reflection of Victorian anxieties about progress and the unknown. And this brings me to the medical technologies I included in Dracula. I showcased a variety of these, from blood transfusions to the era's anatomical knowledge. Remember Dr. Seward's asylum? I portrayed it with its advanced methods of observation and diagnosis. It was intended as the pinnacle of Victorian scientific ambition. Yet, as I wrote it, these technologies repeatedly failed to fully comprehend or control Dracula. Take Mina's blood transfusion, for instance. While saving her life, it also establishes a psychic link with the Count, a clear vulnerability stemming from supposed progress. From my perspective, these medical advancements are limited. This limitation highlights a key theme in my novel: the limits of scientific rationality when confronted with forces beyond human understanding. The very tools intended to protect society become conduits for the very evil they seek to contain, if improperly applied or misunderstood. And these technologies, medical technologies, they repeatedly fail to comprehend or control Dracula in my story. Mina's blood transfusion, while saving her life, also establishes a psychic link between her and the Count, a consequence unforeseen by the rational minds of my protagonists. This highlights a crucial theme: the limitations of scientific rationality when confronted with forces that lie beyond its understanding. From my perspective, I use these medical technologies to underscore a growing Victorian unease with science's potential to overreach. I believe I was cautioning against a naive faith in progress, suggesting that technological advancements, however beneficial, could also open doors to unforeseen dangers, particularly when dealing with ancient, unknowable evils such as the one I created in Dracula.